This is the Books Podcast presented by Tim Hague.
I think it's incredible that the Beatles are still with us, but the great thing was that they broke up. And I'm really proud of Sorry Boys, You Failed Your Audition, and I just am.
I ask you, gentlemen of the jury, is this the kind of book you'd like your wives and servants to read?
Last time we spoke to Ray Connolly was last year on the occasion of his extremely fine biography of John Lennon, and we found an excuse to come and talk to him again. Hello, Ray. How lovely to see you.
Great to see you too.
Our excuse for talking to you this time is the publication of a novella. Sorry, Boys, You Failed the Audition. What's the premise of the book, Ray?
The idea is that what would have happened if in 1962 the Beatles had failed their audition with George Martin at Parlophone Records. But it's seen from the point of view of their young 17-year-old fan club secretary. And I thought, it began life as an article, I think, for the Daily Mail 11 years ago. And I just thought, what would happen if the Beatles hadn't been the Beatles? So we follow their careers through her eyes for the next 7 years.
So it's kind of alternative history, alternative Beatle history, which
it's
weirdly is in the air, isn't it? There's been this film recently on a very different subject, but with the same kind of spirit. But you had the idea first. Not only was it an article, it was a radio play.
An
as
article
well.
first, and then I thought this is a good radio play for the BBC, so I did that, and it went down very well. We were very lucky, and we got a fantastic girl playing Frida. Frida is the fan club secretary, and Frida just can't give up on them. So we had this wonderful girl who was, she wasn't from Liverpool actually, but she had a great accent. She told me her parents were Iranian and Scottish, and she came from Wolverhampton, I think, but had a great Liverpool accent.
Well, Liverpool's a great melting pot, isn't
having
it?
heard it, having learned her accent listening to Brookside, or watching it when she got home from school as a little girl or young girl, and now she's this great girl, and I enjoyed it so much, and as did a lot of listeners. So I thought, this should be a novella, actually. Well, the other thought was maybe it should be a stage play, which the actors at the time said to me they should be on the stage. And I thought it might be for a bit, but I think that getting the musical rights to even 3 or 4 songs is very, very difficult. So in the end...
Yeah, it was like that film yesterday. I think they paid 10 million for the music rights. So that would have been probably a bit out of
my scale.
Our league there,
yeah. So I thought, when you write a radio play, if you don't hear it, it disappears, and no one ever knows. And it's on at 4 o'clock or 2 o'clock, whatever it is, on BBC, and on 2 or 3 times, maybe 3 or 4. But then it's gone. And I thought, if it's a novel, just a little novel, and this is quite a short novel, then it's around forever, and people can say, "Oh, that was a good idea," And maybe one day it will be a stage play, or maybe one day it'll be a film like Yesterday.
Or even better.
Well, hopefully, yeah.
So this Frida Kelly, she actually was a real person.
Frida Kelly was and still is a real person, and she let me rewrite her life for her. She didn't mind at all. She said, "Oh yeah, do what you want, Ray. I don't mind."
What's she like?
She's lovely.
She's
great.
Actually, it's a brilliant idea, Ray. I mean, once you've done it, it's obvious, and I go, "Oh yes, of course," but until you have the idea of these things are never obvious. And taking Frida Kelly, who is one of these peripheral characters in the Beatles story that I've known of for 40 years, but it's never occurred to me to wonder what she was like.
Well, she's a real Liverpool girl, and she's just lovely and nice and friendly, very, very friendly and helpful. And when I said I wanted to do this, she said, "Oh, that's fine, I don't mind. You can." I said, "Well, it'll mean I'll change your life a bit. I'll change your story." She said, "Oh, I don't mind." Because she uses her married name now, although she's no longer married. She uses, and so it's not Frida Kelly. Frida Kelly was her maiden name, and Frida was spelt wrongly too, because her name is spelt slightly differently. But anyway, she didn't mind, and so it's just great because she's great to talk about those early days.
Because she knew the Beatles intimately.
Well, she knew them before they were famous.
Yeah, which is the real trick of it, isn't it?
Norris Green in a sort of scouts hut or something in Norris Green or some gig in Liverpool, and she got a job helping helping, I think, somebody else in Epstein's office, and then the other person disappeared, and she became the fan club secretary, which she thought was the best job in the world. Which, if you're 17 and in Liverpool in 1963, it must have been a great job to have, yeah.
It must indeed. I must say, I thought the dialogue is superb, and I perhaps having come from the radio play, you had the dialogue all worked out. I thought the Beatle banter was brilliant. Sometimes when you come across people trying to do Beatles banter, it can be a bit embarrassing, because it's all a bit forced. You just have an ear for it.
Well, I'm from that part of the world, and I knew them very well, and I could hear it when I was doing it. I could. I mean, I love hearing you say that, but I think it's good too, to be honest.
There's one where you've got John saying, "I'm not going to waste my life trying to be heard," and George saying, "How are you going to waste your life then, John?"
Yeah.
It just sounds like them.
But that's George all over, isn't it? You can just hear him saying, "Well,
well, that's it.
Lugubrious.
You've got which one is which. You've got them knowing which one would be likely to pitch in at that point.
Yeah.
Did you have to sweat blood about it, or is it just all in your past?
It kind of came. Their dialogue kind of came without much effort. There's a bit when later on when Paul says, "I would never ask John Lennon to help me with the song." And I thought, I can hear Paul saying this because he said things like, "I would never have a woman's choir on the long and winding road." When he did say that, and he got very cross about it.
He was right too.
Absolutely right, yeah. But so, they'd said similar things, or I'd heard that tone, and I did hear an awful lot of John anyway, for sure, an awful lot,
And he did have his
and he did talk all the time.
The cadences,
the
the sense of place and time. Again, is amazingly vivid. You've got Frida, going to see Carry On Cruising at the pictures, and
I looked at her. I had to look
Honey
at her.
magazine and things.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask about that because, of course, yes, you said you're from that part of the world.
Yeah.
You're more or less exactly contemporary with the Beatles. You're coeval.
Yeah, with John.
With John, aren't you? Yes.
Yeah. He's slightly older.
Okay, well, it's good to know. I'm sure he boasted about that.
Yeah, probably.
But you were working for the Liverpool Daily Post or something?
Liverpool Daily Post and Echo, the two newspapers. In those days, the Echo was the evening paper, which sold the most. The morning paper, Daily Post, sold more actually in North Wales. But it was for the sort of posher people, the Daily Post was. And I was on the Daily Post, but we'd also do things for the Echo as well, because it's the same office, and the prints would run all day and all night. It was one of those things.
I know from the last time we spoke that you first met the Beatles in '67 when they were making Magical Mystery Tour. But you must have been in Liverpool then at the time that they were playing in the Cavern. Do you kick yourself?
No, I wasn't there. At the time they were in the Cavern, my wife Plum, she went to the Cavern. She saw them also in Southport. Very exciting. And they sang Love Me Do. And that was even on before they were famous. And that was really exciting. And she wrote to me and told me this. I was in London University. And I thought, get away. Liverpool. Nothing good comes from Liverpool. For me, I was such a snob, a real musical snob. It had to be New Orleans or Memphis or Chicago or, Detroit or something. New York, maybe. But Liverpool?
And you've got that chippy sense of resentment in the Beatles in Liverpool in this book.
Yeah.
Saying, oh, well, they're down in London, they don't rate us, they think we're Timbuktu or...
Yeah, but I was from near Liverpool, a place called Ormskirk, about 15 miles away, and we'd go to Liverpool to get to London. For me, that's all I knew about Liverpool, to be honest. So I didn't get to work there until 1964, when the Beatles are gone.
They'd all long gone, yes. Beatlemania was at its height by then.
So I was left behind. I was betwixt and between a bit.
Another detail which is so right for the period is when Frida's job as the fan club secretary disappears.
Yeah.
She walks into another job literally in one day.
Yeah.
People don't remember now what it was like in the 60s. It gave youth an enormous sense of freedom, didn't it? That you could walk out of a job and get another one tomorrow.
Yeah. It was that fantastic thing about, and the whole period of the 60s that people, don't actually understand. It wasn't just the Beatles. It was everything was going with it. You know, the full employment thing, and there were jobs, and so you lose one job, you get another one. You know, it's not the end of the world. And her dad thinks, you know, she's a secretary, shorthand type. Why should you with this gang of ruffians?
Well, you would.
When you know,
if
your
you didn't-
dad, you would think that, wouldn't you?
If you
I think
if
that
you didn't
today-
have Frida's vision that the Beatles should be the greatest show on earth, then yeah, you would think it's just a pop group. It's just a pop band.
yeah.
Why would you waste your time on?
Yeah, and of course, he's a father, and she's no mother. Mother's died. Actually, in real life, she had a stepmother, but this isn't real life. The story is actually slightly different.
It's a very sweet book in that way. Her relationship with her dad is really nice.
Made me cry a bit.
Yeah,
I can very easily get involved, and I was the dad sometimes, you know, because you do. That's what happens when you're writing something, and I was, you know. There's a bit where he goes to watch the football and things and that sort of thing. Yeah, I imagined it completely.
it's very vivid,
and that's why I've done it because you know you write things. I've written millions of things and so much stuff, and lots hasn't been made, or some has been made and it's been all right.
Quite a lot have. I mean, you've published a lot of novels and you've done a whole bunch of screenplays. We'll come back to the screenplays.
But an awful lot of I mean, before you came today, I've been sorting out my study upstairs and finding stuff I'd forgotten I'd even written. And so the stuff, you know, and now and again, there's something that you really like, and I'm really proud of. Sorry, boys, you failed your audition, and I just am. And, you know, it began 8 years ago, and I'm still thinking about it, and still want to see it on the stage. I want to see it on film. I want to see it in books, you know, so I've done it.
That title, Sorry Boys, You Failed the Audition, has an enormous resonance, because one of the things you do is you bring in things that Beatles fans will go, aha, yes.
Yeah.
So that's a reference precisely to.
Well, it's a reference to the very last concert they did on the roof of Apple, and at the end of it, John leans forward and says, I hope we pass the audition, you know, whatever.
And Maureen Stark is applauding there. It's just, and a couple of people giggle. And
Yeah. It was, so I thought, so that's where that came from. I'd forgotten where I got it from. That's where I got it from, obviously, you know.
Okay, so we've got 4 Beatles not becoming the greatest show on earth. What do they do after the dream has died?
Well, what I thought would happen was I tried to work out what would happen, actually, basically, and I thought, well, John, his girlfriend is pregnant.
Which was true.
Yeah, which is true. And they're not going to be stars. They've been trying in Germany, and it's not working out. And I thought he'd probably give in eventually and think, I'm fed up with this. I'm just bored with it. So he drops out. And then the other 3 carry on for a bit. Because, you know, and then Paul's father, who was very keen for Paul to go to university, he leans on Paul, and Paul goes back to school and does his A-levels again.
Which he would have done.
Which he would, because he's clever. So he would have
and studious.
Oh, yeah. And very hard-working. Very hard-working, Paul. And goes off to university. So this is happening. George just wants to play the guitar. He doesn't care who.
Yeah, you've got him as a jobbing guitarist.
Yeah, but he would.
He joins the Pete Best band at one point. That gave me a giggle, because if there's anybody who doesn't know, Pete Best was
the person that was the drummer who was replaced by Ringo Starr on the brink of Beatles stardom.
So George winds up playing in the Pete Best band. That's a lovely little wrinkle, a little irony.
I hope Pete likes that.
Because Pete Best is still alive, of course.
Oh yeah. He's still playing. Or he's playing again. He didn't play for a long time. He's now playing again.
In the 60s, somebody made an album of him playing called Best of the Beatles, which was cheeky.
Well, he does that now. I think he in his set, he now plays lots of Beatles songs because, you know, he says, and I said, why? He said, well, they're such bloody good songs. Well, you know, why wouldn't you?
Why, indeed.
They're the best songs.
Ringo's a businessman, and you have him buying the Cavern.
Well, what I do originally,
that was so good-natured.
Originally, I have Ringo going back to join Rory Storm, playing in Butlins, which is where he was until the Beatles grabbed him away and sacked Pete Best. So he goes back to Rory Storm and plays in US Air Force bases in Germany. And then he plays at Butlins, where Frida goes to see him. And then eventually he disappears, and she wonders, where's he gone? Where's he gone? And eventually Cynthia, who's married to John, finds him, or says where he is, and she goes to see him. And he's actually he's won the pools, basically. It's like winning the lottery today. In those days, you won £75,000.
Again, on the grounds that Ringo is lucky. It's that characterization.
Ringo was
isn't it?
always lucky. And she says, "You're very lucky, Ringo." I said, "Well, yeah, I know, I always am." But then his big worry is, what am I going to spend my money on? And towards the end of the story, you discover he's bought the cavern.
Because, of course, the council were going to knock it down.
Which they did anyway.
Put in 73, in 1970.
Yeah,
I always think that Liverpool should have known by 1973 that the Beatles were iconic. And to knock down the cavern was monstrous.
Well, it's stupid, wasn't it?
Utterly stupid.
But they knocked down a lot of those beautiful Georgian houses and put it, you thought, well, surely it'd be better to have actually done them up and made them really nice people to go and live in, not knock them down, because you can't bring back Georgian times. But they did. I mean,
so
they're very stupid people around,
I've noticed that, yeah. And a lot of them are in authority.
Well, they're the sort of people that want to be in authority.
Yeah, they shouldn't be allowed.
Well, there you are.
So the rest of the book then is
dictator here.
Frida just not accepting.
Frida can't accept any of this, and she keeps on and on and on. And in the end, she's giving up. She has what she does is she has the ex-Beatles fan club. She's, instead of being the Beatles fan club secretary, she's the ex-Beatles fan club secretary, and she continues sending them out, sending all the fans, which are getting fewer and fewer and fewer, details of what they're up to, about, and they don't care. They're not interested. They've moved on. Paul's at university. He's going on holiday to the south of France, picking grapes and things, and she's sort of still stuck in Liverpool, not giving in. And so eventually, she by one way or another.
Yeah, we won't.
And if I
we
tell
won't
you
give
the whole
away the
story,
ending. No, we're not going to
tell
give
you the whole story. You don't need to buy it, need you?
Yeah, exactly.
But
she's desperate to bring them together,
and she doesn't give in.
And there's a lovely elegiac
and she's
feel to it that
yeah.
somehow because what the book is saying is the Beatles were inevitable. You have to have Beatles. The world without the Beatles just won't do.
So did you not believe the film yesterday?
Well, I didn't believe it because it had some whole. I mean, it was nice enough, and the music was good. The songs were great, and that was enough excuse for me.
Yeah.
So I like that. Now, last time we spoke, and naturally we spoke mostly about John Lennon because that's what the book was about. I just want a little bit, for a couple of minutes, to talk about Ray Connolly, because you have some other claims to fame as well. I mean, you've been a journalist, of course. You've written the novels and biographies and things. Probably what people will be most impressed with is you wrote some screenplays. You wrote a couple of movies that I think everybody's seen. You wrote That'll Be the Day and Stardust in the 70s. So I want to ask you a really cheeky question. Did they make you any money?
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you. We all got paid the same. Ringo Starr, David Essex, me.
David Putnam produced, didn't he?
Well, yeah, he was working for a company though. So, but I mean, and Ringo Starr and the director, we all got £5,000 each to do it. Yeah, and I've had royalties ever since, and I think in total I've probably made out of that about £25,000.
Oh, okay, so some money, but
over
not
30 years.
Not life-changing money.
And I think on Stardust, which we did afterwards, I'll tell you, I don't mind people knowing. I mean. I think I maybe had about £30,000 in total. Maybe
Stardust won a BAFTA, didn't it, for Best Screenplay?
No, I got the Writers Guild.
Writers Guild, I beg your pardon.
For that, yeah.
But a Best Screenplay award?
Yeah. It must have been a very thin, a Best British Screenplay. And in those days, there weren't many films being made, many British films being made, so... Yeah, anyway, I was very pleased to get that. It was nice.
What was it like working with Ringo Starr as a movie actor and Keith Moon and David Essex and all of that crowd?
Well, David Essex wasn't really a star. I mean, the real star, the whole thing was David Putnam. It was his idea. I went to borrow a book on Elvis, and because I knew he bought it in New York, And we knew each other not very well. And we got talking, and he said, well, what are you doing? Do you want to write a film for me? Which I didn't even know what a film looked like. A film
God,
script.
those are different times.
Oh, can you
people would
imagine?
murder
Can you
their
imagine?
grandmother to write a film these days.
I had no idea. And I said, well, how do you write one? He said, well, imagine the scene. It's you and me sitting in here. So you int for interior. And then you describe room, room in house, day. And then you set the scene, and then what we're talking about. And then you go to the next scene. So I thought, sounds pretty easy, this does. Well, actually, it's a bit harder than that. But basically, we sat together and we plotted that'll be that day, very roughly. It was based on a song by Harry Nilsson. The idea was based on that.
1941.
1941, A Happy Father Had a Son. And in the song, the boy leaves to join the circus. And David said, maybe you should go to a fair.
A fun fair, that's right.
And that's what we had. And then we thought, well, it should be about our growing up period, what we were doing. And David left school at 15, 16, went to work, and I went to university. So I was the really dozy one in the two. In the film, we've got David Essex drops out, and his friend goes to university. Well, I was like the friend who did the really straight things. And so we did it, and I would write it every day when I got home from at the time I was on the Evening Standard, interviewing a lot of very famous people. But when I had the time, I'd write this film. David Putnam would come around for his breakfast like 2 or 3 mornings a week, see what I'd written. And I'd show him, and we'd laugh and make jokes and go away. And then eventually, I just assumed it would be made anyway. I mean, it never occurred to me that you write a film, it wouldn't be made. And I think David was a bit wiser than me. He said, well, we'll see. Anyway, it was made, but he forced it through. But then he couldn't find all the money. And we had to raise some more money. And he got a deal with Ronco Records, a Canadian company, that if we could put 40 tracks in the film of rock and roll songs, because we're going to have about 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 4 at maximum, but we had to get 40 in. So we thought, well, if he's on the fair, we can have him going from the Dodgems, where we get like 10 seconds of the Everly Brothers, to the Big Wheel, where you get 10 seconds of Little Richard, and we have him going from one to the other of these things, just to get snatches of these songs as he went.
I thought that was reckless of you when I saw it. I thought this must have cost a fortune to get the rights to all these songs. But it was a deal.
It worked the other way. Actually, they then put money in. I mean, it did cost whoever a lot of money, but not like $1 million, not like 10 million, not like the film these days. It cost probably, I don't know, 100,000. No, it couldn't cost that. The entire film only cost £210,000.
Yeah, but it made $500,000. Yeah. It made $500,000 profit. I looked it up.
Made a lot of money. Yeah. But not for
both
us.
of them. Both of them made
not for
good
us.
money.
I think EMI did very well out of them, and Ronco did very well, because they then sold them through the TV companies, and so they'd have these commercials for our film using these songs, and go and see this great film with David Essex and these records, and so it was fluke. So it was a huge success, and a success in a way. I was surprised at how well it was received, but in a way I thought it would get made, because David was going to get it made, and he'd made his mind up, and he was a great producer. But then,
yeah, he's done quite well since.
Oh yeah, but when we'd done that, on the way to one of the screenings, we're going along Hyde Park Lane, and he said, "We've got to do the sequel." I said, "What?" He said, "No, we're going to do a sequel next, Raymond. That's what we're going to do." And I said, "Well, are you sure?" He said, "Well, either that or we do it on the stage. What do you think?" And I said, "Well, we don't know anything about the stage, either of us." He said, "No, well, let's do a film then." So then I went on holiday with him and his family down to Italy, and we planned Stardust, same way. And then we couldn't get Ringo Starr. In the first one, we got Ringo Starr in That Time of the Day, because we hadn't been, neither David or me had been actually to Butlins, and we knew Ringo would work.
Ringo was the only person you knew who'd been to Butlins.
Yeah. So we got Ringo in, and we went. I just rang up Apple and said, Derek Taylor, and said, "Can we talk to Ringo about?" And he said, "Great, all right, we'll go in." We had lunch with him, and Neil Aspinall, who was then the managing director of Apple. He'd been their roadie once, but he'd been to Butlins too. So we all sat and laughed and had a few laughs. And I sort of slightly changed the script, not much, but we were going to give Ringo a small part in the film, the part that Billy Fury got finally. And on the way out, we sort of said, maybe we should give him the part, a big part, of the other guy in the film. And so that was what happened.
And it worked. He was good.
He was great, the best thing he ever did in film. And it was a tragedy, really, because he was so good. But he wouldn't do the Stardust. And we have to assume it was too close to home because it was about a rock star. And he didn't want to do it anyway. So we got Adam Faith in, who was all right. And that's how that worked. It's pure luck, though, It was just pure luck for me to get involved with David Putnam when he was a rising young producer, and we just got on. We're still friends. We're still talk, In fact, 2 years ago, we thought maybe we should have carried the story on to be a sort of long-running series. These days for television, do that period. But I think nobody wanted it. So
we'll go back to the book. Sorry, boys, you failed the audition. Just for one more general question, do you not think it's incredible, after all this time, that there's still so much mileage in the Beatles?
I think it's incredible, yeah. The Beatles are still with us. But, the great thing was that they broke up and that John finished them on a peak. If he'd not, and they'd sort of gone on, and album by album, they wouldn't have been as good. They would have sort of
You mean
slid away.
if a Beatles record had included the frog chorus, it might not it might have tarnished the luster a bit.
But that thing about the great thing, Mozart died at 33 or 35 or something, and the great thing, the Beatles died in effect when they were 30, and no matter what they did afterwards, and John had Imagine and Paul had a few great songs too, not that many, or John didn't either, but the Beatles were frozen in time, and those 7 years in the 60s, because they ended in September 69, in effect, those 7 years were they were just part of the furniture of the time, part of everyone's lives, in a way only the Queen is that famous. They were so famous. It's hard to understand now and appreciate how important they were. But they were like a locomotive dragging everything along with them. And whatever happened, the Beatles sort of seemed to be involved in some way, although they weren't. They seemed to be, because they caught the moment. And we let them catch the moment, and we encouraged them to catch the moment. But they did, and they were just so incredibly good.
Ray, thank you for talking to us, and thank you very much for this lovely little book, which is Sorry Boys, You Failed the Audition, by Ray Connolly, published by Malignon at £7.50. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was the Books Podcast with Tim Haig. The Books Podcast is produced by Green Shoot. You can find out more at www.green-shoot.com, and Tim can be contacted on tim@green-shoot.com.